Hello everyone and welcome to our live discussion regarding the situation of refugees in Greece during this time of coronavirus. This initiative today is being organized from the REACT Collective in Berlin. We are a group of people from Greece, Germany and other countries who are joined together against the inhumane and violent policies of Greece and the rest of Europe. We would like to give first of all a small overview of the situation. Right now, there are at least 110,000 people living in migrant facilities in Greece, of which 40,000 of them are in overcrowded hotspots in the Aegean Islands, such as Chios and Lesvos. The last months, international aid organizations, human rights groups, and doctors have sounded the alarm and urged the Greek government to evacuate the camps. We all understand that there is a high risk of this fast-moving virus to spread rapidly among people living in squalid conditions. There is a lack of access to testing, medical facilities, and basic services, including water stations and taps. We realize that an outbreak in such settings would be impossible to contain. In the meantime, the Greek authorities have already locked down 2 migrant camps after residents were tested positive for the coronavirus. This means that the people that are staying there are being left deserted. Due to these unspeakable living conditions, social distancing simply cannot happen. Still, refugees are trying hard and find ways to self-organize. Residents and volunteers have collectively organized their own protective measures. As an example, in Moria camp, a group of Afghan women are working at a rapid rate to produce protective masks. It is also known that a couple of days ago, refugees that are held in Moria, the pre-removal detention center in Lesvos Island, proceeded on a hunger strike, demanding their immediate release to avoid the disastrous consequences of a virus outbreak. However, the strike was forced to stop after police intervention, and there has been serious allegations of police violence against the refugees. It is also important to highlight at this moment that during March, the Greek government suspended all asylum requests, and right now the new migration bill on asylum applications is on public consultation. In the meantime, all over Europe, many movements, organizations, citizens, cities are raising their voices as an act of solidarity and urgently demand the relocation of the refugees in safe grounds and in human viable conditions. So today we have 4 speakers with us. I will introduce them right away. So we will discuss thoroughly all these demanding issues. First of all, we will have Parvana. She's an activist refugee that currently staying in Ritsona camp, which is the first refugee camp in Greece with coronavirus cases, and currently is in quarantine. Then we will have Karolos, which is an epidemiologist doctor who has worked for the organization Doctors of the World and currently is working for the Greek National Public Health Organization. Then we have Yorgos, an activist involved many years in the anti-racist movement in Greece, such as Teki Metanaston, Migrant Social Center in Athens, as well as in the Anti-Racist Festival in Athens. And then we do have Anton from Seebrücke, Berlin. Seebrücke is an international movement in solidarity with people who are forced to flee their homes. Welcome to all. And for our listeners, you can type on YouTube comments in the YouTube comment section any kind of questions that you might be interested to ask our speakers, and we will address to them to the respondents accordingly. So let's start with Parvana. How are you, Parvana? How is it going?
I'm good, thank you. So first of all, good evening to everyone, and thank you to let everybody to share the situation and the problems and to open this kind of discussions and to find the solutions. So thank you very much.
Thank you for giving us also your time, because we do understand how difficult it is right now. In these conditions, there is also no Wi-Fi. You're there on your own with your own data. And thank you so much for contributing to this and bringing us awareness of what exactly is going on.
So thank you for letting me be involved in your program.
So now you're almost like 2 weeks in quarantine, correct?
Yes, it's more than 2 weeks.
More than
Exactly. It's for 18 days that we are in quarantine.
Could you please describe the situation in Rizona camp right now?
Uh, our
So,
campus,
just a second. We have Carlos also on the panel. Hello.
Hello.
Please continue, Parvana. Sorry for this interruption.
no, no problem. So, as Return Refugee Camp is constructed to house the vulnerable refugees, and as all the world is facing with the pandemic of coronavirus, the first case of coronavirus started from Arizona. I mean, from this camp, and it is for 18 days that we are in quarantine. And for the first time that the first case of coronavirus confirmed in this camp, they just gave 14 days quarantine for the residents, and it was just to not go outside of the camp. And it means that the residents can be inside of the camp, they can be in contact with each other. And after that, when they started testing from the first community that the first case confirmed, they found out that there are 23 confirmed cases of coronavirus out of 63 tested people. And then they gave 14 days quarantine for the residents of return refugee camp. But after that, unfortunately, as the authorities couldn't, I mean, isolate the ones that they have been infected by the virus, so the residents of the camp, they were for 1 week in contact with each other. And during 1 week, when they gave the tests for the second time, they found out that there are 7 more positive cases of the virus out of 90 people tested from the medical organization of the camp. It means that now there are 30 positive cases of the coronavirus in return refugee camp.
Do you see, are there any measures for the most vulnerables there?
So unfortunately, there is no, special like measures for the most vulnerable people. But totally, this camp is constructed for the vulnerable refugees to move them from the island to the mainland. I mean, to this camp. So totally, all people they have all the families that they moved to this camp. They have vulnerable cases. But for the most vulnerable ones, there is no, special measures, and the protection base and for example the attention is equal in all the ways for everybody. But even more, the only measure is for all the residents of the campus to stay in the inside of the camp, and also to stay in the iso boxes. This is the only mm, the only protection way that they are giving us and availing us about it.
So we conclude from this like hygiene conditions, social distancing is not even the case.
The They add some distribution of Asian packets and dry food that is serve nothing as long that we are separating the virus inside of the camp and among ourselves. And with just giving for example, the Asian packets and dry food, it is not enough, and it is not helpful until the ones that they are infected by the virus are freely inside of the camp. They are in contact with the ones that they don't have the virus. But to keep the distance, it is sometimes impossible, because there are many families, almost two families, that they live in one house in one iso box, and they use the public places. So it is a big risk for the members of each family that they are living in the iso boxes and also in the houses.
Of course. Um, have they given you any further notice of what might happen in the near future?
So until they don't have the statistics that how many people are infected by the virus, because they couldn't start the testing, public testing from all the residents, and until now they just tested about 153 53 people from total of the population of the camp. So that's why they don't have any idea about how many people are infected by the virus. And besides, as in every each week they are trying to test number of people, and after that to find out how many people are infected by the virus. And like this, in each series of testing, they are updating the quarantine time in 14 days. For example, in the first time when they tested and found out that there are positive cases, they gave 14 days quarantine for the residents. And in the second week, they found out that there are 7 people that are infected by the virus, and they gave 14 more days quarantine for the residents. And as they mentioned that it will continue like this. For example, in each week, when they will find out that there are people that have been infected by the virus, so then they will update the 14 days quarantine for the residents.
In the meantime, how are you able to have food in the camp? How are you able to have water in the camp? How are you able to help these people that they're being in quarantine, because it's only you there, there's no one else? Is there any other possible person from an NGO or from the state that can enter the camp?
Okay. So can you please repeat the first question?
Yes, of course. So in the meantime, like during this quarantine, are you able to have food supplies and water supplies? Who is providing you?
Fortunately, we have proper access to water, but the problem is with the food part. For example, in each week, they are distributing the food baskets to the residents, but this food is just dry food. It means there is no, for example, some other materials that they are necessary to cook a proper food. For example, onions, potatoes, tomatoes, or flour to bread. To bake breads. So that's why mostly it pushes the residents to go out of their isoboxes and to, for example, provide their necessities such as medicines. Mostly they are buying the medicines, and also these kind of materials to cook the proper food. That these kind of things we can find them from the internal shops of the camp. There are some small shops inside of the camp, and there is where people can buy their necessities.
I see. Is this at your camp, or you know that this situation is in other camps as well? For example, you were in Moria before. How is the situation in Moria now?
Unfortunately, the situation in Moria is getting worse and worse every day, as it is so hard even to pass a route. So how it can be possible to keep 2 meters distance from each other? And as you know, in the camps that they are in islands, people are using public places, and they are staying in long queues in each time for meal. So that's why it is impossible to, for example, keep their distances. And I think it is a we are lucky that this virus started from this camp, because this camp is under capacity, and it shows that how hard it can be to keep the safety of people, even if the refugees are in a camp that the capacity is under the measures. So but as you know, in other camps that are in islands, the capacity is over the number that they could protect the refugees. So you can obviously see the differences between the camps. And this camps, however, um, it can house more places and can be a shelter for more refugees. But in Moria, when the capacity is for 3,000, there are 20,000 refugees inside. So of course it is, I mean, multi of the number that they can protect the refugees. So it is almost impossible to observe the protection rate.
In this state, would you tell us how refugees in the camps and the hotspots are able to self-organize and do a networking so as to cope with the situation, solidarity, and resist towards that? For example, we saw this Leros coronavirus awareness team. Is there something the same in Arizona or in Moria?
Uh, yes. So unfortunately, there is a deep belief between people that it doesn't matter to be inside of the house until you are living with the ones that they are infected by the virus, or to be outside of your ISO boxes. So mostly people don't observe or don't care about being inside of the house or outside of their houses, and so mostly as there is no NGOs inside of the camp, and even the medical department of the camp stopped their activities due to the last argue that happened between the infected community and also the doctors. So they decided to not be in the camp for a while until the situation will calm down. And mostly just to ask and to like to have some donations, I have to be in contact with people and to ask them about their problems and what they need, because this is a camp for vulnerables, and of course there are people that they need medicines. And before, for 1 week ago, people could give money to the nurses that they were working in the clinic, and after that they could bring them and they could buy them the medicines. But now even we don't have that chance to give the money and to provide the medicines. So I could find some friends and some people from Athens and somewhere else to bring us some this kind of medicines, and that's why I have to be in contact with them. Like when there are some donations, I have to distribute between people. About the awareness team, yes, before this pandemic and before the quarantine starts, uh, I had some campaigns with youths of my community with cooperation of IOM organization, and I could give some information about how to protect them, how to, for example, what to do and how to tell this kind of protection ways to their children. It was very helpful, but after that, with order of government that you cannot gather people in one place and give them information, I had to suspend my activities, and even more, the medical part, they also had to suspend their activities in case of giving information about the coronavirus.
At this moment, how do you feel from the way that the Greek government addresses refugees in this pandemic?
Um, you know, if we have been treated differently from rest of the population of the country that we have been living, uh, so it's okay. But now, I don't know what politicians, the Greek government, and the authorities are waiting. The alarm is sounding loud and clear, and there is no 1 hour chance to wait longer. And when I don't know if they are really waiting when everybody will be infected by the virus, so that time there will be no space for anybody to keep them and to isolate them. So because when everybody will be infected by the virus, so there will be no space to isolate the ones that they are infected by the virus. Uh, just to quarantine people inside of the camp and to be in contact with the ones that they are infected, it is not a solution, because it is just like a massive extinction, and it is a pretension that refugees are can be safe being quarantined, and like to just provide them the primary necessities, because a camp is not a place to keep the safety of people, to keep the health of the refugees. A camp means where people are in a close contact, and it is impossible for them to keep the protection ways and even more the distance.
Yeah.
So when all the world is like threatened with everybody, and this virus is threatened with everybody equally, why we shouldn't have this equally treatment with ourselves? So we can obviously see that there is no differences between the, for example, the living condition that we had before and that we have it now.
Let me ask you some questions from our viewers,
Yes.
because it seems that they're really into what you're saying right now, and they want to ask you a lot of stuff. What would you say? Which are the immediate needs right now?
The first thing is the powder milk for babies, because there are a lot of babies, newborn babies, and as their mother, they don't have a strong nutrient system to I mean the to give the food milk for their babies. So they really need for powder milk for their babies. And after that, there are some pregnant women that most of them they are ready for delivery, or they are in the last month of pregnancy, and they have to be checked because they are not sure about the health of their babies. Another one is with the medicines. A lot of as you know, this camp is for vulnerables, and a lot of them they need their medicine that they were using before. When there is nobody in the camp to, for example, to at least give them the money to bring us the medicines, and we are not allowed to go out. So who is going to provide us the medicines? And these days, fortunately, I could find some foundations with the medicines, but it is not sufficient, because we are speaking about more than 3,000 refugees, and it cannot be just with single foundations and donations. So baby milk for babies and also the medicines are the immediate necessities of the camp.
Would you say that there's a question here? Is there a safe zone for infected people, and some ISO boxes used only for infected?
No, there is no ice boxes, but they built some tents, and inside of the tents they provided their necessities like dry foods and anything that they can need, and they made some sample toilets and bathrooms so that they can use. But unfortunately, the problem is that the ones that they are infected by the virus, they don't believe that they have the virus, because, as you know, they didn't have the symptoms, and they think that until we don't have the symptoms, why you are trying to tell everybody that we have the virus? So it is a big problem, and it caused many argues between the doctors and also between the people that they were infected by the virus.
There's another question for you. Is there a channel to get news directly from people in the camp? And do you use Twitter, Facebook, or any blog? And it seems that we only find journalists talk about them. How could we listen to them directly? So they're asking, how can your voice be raised and check on you directly and reply to your needs directly?
So because I couldn't speak with the authorities of a camp to ask them if I am allowed to ask for some donations from outside of a camp, because in the first time when I did this the first donation just for medicines and for the powder milk and some diapers for the children. It was very hard because I faced with some problems to bring them inside of the camp. Uh, but yes, I used Twitter, I used Instagram and Facebook, and mostly um, I update the news about the for example, situation of the camp. And the name is exactly similar with the name of my Facebook, so it is the same. And people are in urgent need, and this is time to show your helps, because many eyes are looking for the helps. And
at this point, I will ask you a last question, and then we will proceed to the next speakers, and then we will come back to you as well. What is your message to the people in Europe right now?
Sorry, I couldn't hear you.
No worries. What is your message to the people in Europe?
So today most of the people, they think that they are far from world of refugees, but know that all the people are also alive, ignored, and in need as an asylum, as a refugee. As so far we fought spiritually with this virus, but now we cannot fight with this virus with this condition that we are living, because this virus is asking us more than our ability. When people will have this belief that refugees should be allocated from the camps and families, and mostly the children, that they are the first victims of this virus, they should be allocated from the children. So we will have a eye cooperation with ourselves. And I think that citizens are the main source of politicians. However, the politicians are the legislators, but these are the citizens and the people that they are living in a country. They are affected by the legislations of politicians. So when people will announce their solidarity with refugees and with humanity and with to speak about equality, mm, then uh, I I believe that there will be many solutions for this pandemic that refugees are facing with.
Thank you so much for everything that you have said, and for your contribution, for your time. Thank you for everything. Just hold on the line, yeah? We will continue now with Carlos, our next speaker. Hello, Carlos. Carlos, the epidemiologist, and we will definitely need his point of view as an expert. So how are you, first of all? You need
Can
to
you
put
hear me?
Yes, now we can. Yes, thank you.
Fine. Thank you very much for having me here. It's a great pleasure. Based on the questions you have sent me via email, I have organized a small input. So let me just first start by, as Parvana already mentioned, there are different sort of camps in Greece. You can categorize them in three different types. It's the reception and identification centers, mainly in the islands and in the border region of Evros, camps in the mainland, and you have also pre-deportation camps. All three categories have substandard living conditions in terms of hygiene, in terms of water availability, in terms of sanitation. But if you compare them, probably the worst are the reception and identification centers on the islands and the pre-deportation camps. If we're talking about refugee and migrant population, we should not forget that there is also, in total, we have 100,000 plus refugees and migrants now in Greece, of which 1/6 about are living in apartments. And the rest, as I said, in camps. And you have also an unknown number of people that are unregistered, that are, so to say, irregular migrants. And all three categories of these people face also very important barriers and difficulties accessing normally the health system. This is also something we should keep in mind. As I said, now, if we focus on the people in the camps, the particularity now in this context, in an epidemic, is that they're the most vulnerable, because, as I said, in these settings, you have no means whatever to do social distancing, to even if the people would like to apply all the hygienic measures and what we are recommending, etc., it's impossible in such a setting. So even before COVID, it's mere luck that we did not have any major outbreaks of infectious diseases in these camps. There were some minors like hepatitis A or varicella outbreaks, but luckily we didn't have any major outbreaks. But we have to understand that this as in other countries, these sort of settings are perfect breeding places for infectious diseases. And of course, COVID-19 is an infection that is highly contagious. So you can imagine that outbreaks can easily spread and evolve in such a setting. The measures so far taken, there was no real preparation. These flaws of the hygienic condition, wash condition, water condition in the camps is a chronic one, but there was nothing done a priori to improve these conditions. After a lot of pressure from UN agencies involved, NGOs, activists, public opinion, the government plans or is starting Yes, I am.
Okay, we cannot see you right now, but hopefully it will come back. Okay, now we're back.
So as I said, now there is a process starting, a very, very slow process to evacuate some of the extremely vulnerable people from the reception and identification centers in some of the islands, mainly elderly, meaning over 65 years, and some people with chronic medical conditions. This did not happen before in mass scale, although this was already obvious that the capacities in the reception and identification centers were surpassed. Because I would say of a mixture of incompetency, lack of political interest, the still still active EU-Turkey deal, and also because of reaction from communities in the mainland that resisted a lot relocation of mass relocation of refugees from the islands to the mainland. Now a very prominent topic and very widespread accusation or assumption by particularly far-right circles is that refugees imported COVID or may import or they pose a threat for importing COVID to Europe. If you look at the data in Europe of the countries that are most affected by COVID, there is a direct association with the density of international flights. So the main means of importation of this disease was per international flight and not per transpassing of borders by individuals. And in analogy to other infectious diseases, we know that refugees and migrants do not pose a public health threat for the native population because per se they have a very, very segregated way of living. And we know that they are the most vulnerable population group in a population for getting infected by infectious disease. And in this population, you can have the most devastating consequences of an epidemic. What is the big preoccupation is that even after, if it's mere luck that currently we have only 2 camps where we know that there is an ongoing epidemic. Perhaps there are others and we don't know, we are not registering that. But the big challenge will be to, with the lockdown measures now being lifted gradually in the society as general, to have really ongoing epidemics within the camps. Now, what could be done? Even as we're speaking, as I said, the decongestion of overpopulated camps is not happening, or in a very, very slow pace. This should be accelerated, of course. It should be the moving out the elders, the medically vulnerables, the mothers with babies, etc., should be a key priority. On each camp, there should be a triage method organized, quarantine spaces identified, and have standard operating procedures of what happens when you have a suspected case, which is currently not the case. Very important is, as Parvana mentioned, what we are seeing is that even the very, very limited primary healthcare that exists within camps now, within the context of the pandemic, gets weakened instead of getting strengthened. And we know, not only from camp settings, but in general, that the collateral health damages will be much higher than the ones of an epidemic with an agent that is very effective, but not very lethal. So you will have much more health damage being done by people not getting their medicines, by babies not being breastfed, etc. So you need to enhance now, in this situation, your primary health resources within camps instead of weakening them. Also, in this emergency status, I think no government would have any problem to say we lift, at least temporarily, any bureaucratic barrier to access to health. No access to healthcare, secondary, tertiary, is unconditional, and refugees and migrants get all entitlements. If the pandemic ceases, then every government can, they can do withdraw this measure or keep it. But I think nobody would disagree within the pandemic to do such a step. And also very important is to have health information campaigns within the camps so that the people do understand what this virus is about, do understand that they can be asymptomatic and still being infected, so that we destigmatize people that are found positive with COVID. And also, of course, at the same time, inform the society as a whole on COVID, on that refugees and migrants do not pose a public health threat. And finally, make available any therapy or diagnostic method that is being approved by the national health authorities, also in the camp settings. Currently, there is a protocol for therapy for COVID for patients being treated as outpatients in the community. This can be adapted as evidence evolves. It's not something that might not change within the next few weeks, but I think that the state has the obligation, if it gives this recommendation for doctors to treat people in the community, it should make this medication and these tools, diagnostic tools, also available in the camp settings. So yes, based on the questions you have raised, that's my summary.
Thank you so much for sharing this awareness with us and all this knowledge, actually. Currently, it seems that we don't have any questions for you individually. So we will continue to Yorgos, and then we'll come back to you so as to that we can discuss all of us together. Yeah. So Yorgos, for you, based now in Greece, many years as an activist in the anti-racist movement, could you please give us an overview about the situation before the coronavirus and after?
Yes, hello from me. Well, as everybody knows, there was a very dense and tragic period that before the coronavirus. So last February we had two major incidents: the border incident at Evros and an anti-migrant mobilization in the islands of Chios and Lesvos. Which can be said that really changed the situation we face. It changed it regarding the institutional setting and the policies, but also in the discourses we have a strengthening of racism overall. And as the first reactions from the solidarity movement appeared, then came coronavirus pandemic and the restriction of movement, so we are halted. But a major thing, and what's already said, is that this crisis, that is a health crisis, it is a border management crisis, will be followed by a deep economic crisis, especially in Greece. We will have massive unemployment right after the crisis, but also during these days we can think that all the workers in precarious jobs and a big majority of migrants and refugees lose their income. So we can see that these three crises flow into each other, and this brings us in a very in a position that we have to reconsider how we act, how we network. What does it mean to work together and unify some demands? There is, in case of a health crisis like coronavirus, we see that there is more relevant than ever the right of access to public health and to social rights. And this is our first point, that there is an unconditional demand that everybody has access to public health without any discrimination. Of course, we know in Greece since 10 years we have seen how during the crisis and in the course of crisis mechanisms of segregation and discrimination are revealing, are intensified and broadened. As there is this moment that all the society and the social movements and the solidarity movement to refugees can point, so this right, access to social rights, at the same moment it is a chance for nationalism and racism to put to spread its segregational ideas, and that's where we are at this moment. It was said that the migrants, especially the incoming migrants, are treated as enemies, as asymmetric threats and invaders. This is dominant at this moment, and we see also that that the bankruptcy of EU-Turkey deal and the hotspot system, all this tragic condition in the islands have turned societies which were quite tolerant or even helpful in the previous time to be really hostile to migrants and everybody who's about to help. Yes. What else? We see that the Greek government during the border crisis after Erdogan somehow used and the migration movement in order to push and blackmail Europe. In this moment we had a massive military operation at the borders, and measures like the suspensions of right to asylum. The government tried to implement a new status, a new regime for all the newcomers after the 1st of March, propagating, saying that everybody will be held to the closed camps, to some new closed camps, and without having the right to claim for asylum, they will be directly deported to countries of origin and transit countries. This government wanted to make it, to state it as an example of a change. It's very similar to the Orban policies in 2015-2016. We see that Orbanism is now official policy, not of Greece, but also took its acceptance from the commissioner. Nevertheless, the suspension of asylum right didn't postponed, is halted now, probably from a pressure from international organizations and the EU, but there is a formal right to apply for asylum, but on the other side there is a practical there are obstacles, and the access to asylum is actually not there. The corona crisis and the border crisis led to policies that existed before, but not in a such a scale. So there is on the sea and on the land borders. There are information of mass pushbacks to Turkey, also new ways and new methods of pushing back. Illegal practices that before was kept hidden, now they are publicly defended. In this way, we are in the defensive, but on the other side, it is a time to reconsider, to reflect, and to start from where we are to organize and network. And what Parvan said and is doing and can do through the social networks is really important. We know that even in these quarantine conditions, there is a way to protest, and we have to use this means at this time and proceed after the restrictions of movement to halt this chain of events that leads us to a quite barbaric situation.
How can someone support refugees today in Greece, and especially in the Greek islands, like right now? And are still people arriving on the islands, and which exactly is the procedure, if so? If someone wants to come and help right now, is there any opportunity?
Of course, always there is an opportunity. Of course, it's not the situation that was before. So it's there is a mistrust and even hostility, especially in Chios and Lesvos. But this doesn't mean that there is not the room and people who are doing things in these islands. I think this can be made through the local groups and groups that are acting in the field. We in Athens, we're trying to, for example, to collect some material and food for people being detained or in detention facilities in Athens. We are, but there is not, for sure, we have to say that we are some in comparison to the previous years, we are in the defense. We came in the defense, and we are starting new. So it's a moment that the discussion is open, and the new structures have to be built.
Yes. There is a question from our viewers for you. How can you tell us so far? Sorry, give me just a second to try to read it. Yeah. All right. So we'll leave this question for now. And all right. So are the refugees in Greece deprived of healthcare insurance at the moment? And can Greece follow the example of Portugal to provide the same benefits as to the native population?
Yeah, until July, there was all the refugees formally had access to the public health system. It was one of the first measures. I think it was the first decision of the government to exclude them from getting the insurance number, the AMCA. In the meantime, and after critics, they declared a new parallel system of insurance, which it's actively not working. It's not in use. But I think in general and in the hospitals, my view is that nobody is really restricted, so a serious case is not kept out. Of course, there's many obstacles for a migrant to find a way to be in the hospital. So we are in this situation in between. Factually, there is not, and what was described about the camps, it's really exclusion.
Yes. Thank you also so much for the contribution. Please hold in the line. Yeah. And now we'll go to Anton. Thank you for your patience, Anton, as well. So news from Zeebrugge. And you're based in Berlin. Yes, you're a member of this organization. Movement, exactly. Could you tell us a bit about the struggles, the initiatives in Germany concerning refugees in the hotspots?
I will do so. I just wanted to start briefly by raising two other issues. First, I think it's important to keep in mind that the specific situation of the corona disease doesn't just affect refugees in Greece, but all over Europe. We see in Germany at the moment is that some of the mass accommodations, basically camps, are being isolated as soon as there is as soon as authorities suspect there are cases, and they isolate whole accommodations of hundreds of people, in part by using police forces and so on and so forth. So what we see at the moment, I think in Germany as well, is some kind of like two-tier system where apparently it's easier to use repressive force against migrants in comparison to German citizens or people with papers and so on. And a group of self-organized collectives and NGOs and so on has just put out a paper of demands on what should change in Germany regarding the corona situation and refugees. And the first very important point is to end these kinds of mass, basically to distribute people out of these mass accommodations. We have all the hotels and so on and so forth that are empty at the moment, where you could house people much more easily, where they wouldn't be forced to have shared sanitary facilities, shared kitchens, and so on. The second point is very similar to what Giorgos just talked about, to open the general healthcare system and to offer basically full health coverage also to people who are currently asylum seekers. And the last, also very important point, is to stop deportations, which sounds baffling at the moment, but Germany still just organized flights to deport migrants to other countries in this situation where you have restrict all kinds of movements. That is still ongoing, and of course that has to stop. And the second kind of peripheral point to our discussions that I wanted to raise is that not only the situation in the hotspots and so on is affected by Corona, but also in the central Mediterranean. So Seebrücke was originally founded mostly because rescue ships couldn't operate anymore in the central Mediterranean, as and to demand civil society support for that. And what we see now is that Italy and Malta both have declared their ports unsafe due to the Corona outbreak. And there are reports that I think Malta, don't quote me on that, even started pushback operations. And to like put the cherry on the cake, Libya as well now isn't taking back people. So the Libyan so-called Coast Guard, de facto militia, brought back people from the Mediterranean and then quarantined them, or basically locked them up on the ship and didn't let them get back to shore. So I think it's important to also keep that situation in mind, and to see how now, right-wing politicians, but even centrist politicians, use the situation to basically have one further argument why we need Fortress Europe. But these, so let's not just put these two, peripheral points to the side. And if we look more closely, I think to at least in my impression, what is going on with the situation in the Greek islands and so on. As Seebrücke, or as civil society organizations in Germany, we raised the demand to evacuate at least the most vulnerable people, meaning unaccompanied minors, unaccompanied children from these camps. Sometime, I think in December, is when we seriously started the campaign. And what has happened since is that there are a bunch of cities in Germany, all over Europe, who have declared that it wouldn't be any problem whatsoever to take in those people, those children especially, and yet still the German government, many Central Western European governments are completely blocking this way forward. We had an agreement, I think, a month ago to at least receive, I think, 1,500 minors to Germany. Nothing has happened over 4 weeks or so. And now we, ended up with is that 50 children will be evacuated. In comparison to anything that would be feasible, and very much, I'm interested actually in Carlos's opinion, how feasible it would be on the ground, but at least from all that we hear from German city administrations and so on, there is no administrative problem to welcome these people and to take care of them and so on. So I think, maybe to make up yet another comparison, if we see what was possible now, the German government just provided flights to bring back German tourists from all over the world, and brought back, I think, 80,000 people or so, 200,000 people within just a few weeks. we have discussions at the moment to allow tens of thousands of agricultural workers from mostly Eastern Europe to come to Germany. And still they claim it's not feasible to evacuate very few people in the end in comparison to what could be achieved due to the situation. And I think that's something where we have to get in what we are already doing and what many people are doing all over Europe to say we will not leave anyone behind. So we will keep up the pressure and we will not ignore the fate of those who are most affected by the crisis, who are, the most vulnerable, just because basically I know Seehofers, so the German Ministry of Interior and so on, are somehow use this crisis to roll back on things we're already decided on. And I think in this sense, we have to at least defend those measures that were already agreed upon, and then go beyond that within the next months and think more about how to apply pressure and how to also find ways to think about the situations that we will face now with the economic crisis that is basically inevitable and so on, to forge new narratives of solidarity where I think we somehow have to come up with ways of talking about how the virus affects all of us, but yet affects us differently, but could also be some kind of ground of solidarity beyond borders, beyond status groups and so on, and think about something of a narrative that already we can put both against this kind of centrist ignorance and against right-wing hatred. And I think that will be one of the main challenges for us moving forward as movement actors in Germany, where we aren't, directly affected by the situation in Greece. Thank you very, very much, by the way, for all your inputs and reports. It's tremendously helpful to hear about that in more detail. So far from my side.
Thank you, Anton, for this. Thank you so much. There is a question for you now. How do you think people in Germany respond to the demands regarding the refugees?
So I think there's nothing, there are no homogenous people in Germany. What we see is that there is tremendous outpouring of support for our demands. The campaign Leave No One Behind had thousands upon thousands of signatures. We have, for example, the churches, which are, surprisingly, maybe for radical leftists, one of our closest allies. And the Pope and the German Protestant chief bishop both raised the issue in their Easter sermons or speeches. And also on the ground, you see, we see pictures from all over Germany of people hanging out banners, trying to organize demonstrations. We had, I think, actions in 30, 40 cities last weekend. We have online demonstrations and so on. So I think there is still a lot of support for these demands. Of course, we all know it's 2020 and we know how strong right-wing actors are. Of course, there's also hatred and ignorance and so on the other side. But I still think, in comparison to many other campaigns, support is actually there. And it's mostly something that is stuck at the, on the level of government. I don't think it's an issue of convincing civil society as much as with other issues.
So we see a lot of movement from the individuals and from organizations, and it's of course something that can make us a bit optimistic about the situation. So there is another one question. Who or which instance in the German European Union government blocks the evacuation?
So, actually, I'm interested in the answer to that as well. From what I understand, and I'm not immediately involved even within Seebrücke with these issues, I have to be clear about that, is that the Ministry of Interior says that there are administrative issues on the ground in Greece that inhibit them from, choosing and verifying identities and so on, and that would be the reason why they couldn't move forward, why they couldn't, why they couldn't do anything over the last 4 or 5 weeks. At the same time, we've seen time and again, also with the reallocation of people who were rescued in the central Mediterranean and then were supposed to come to Germany, that apparently the German institutions aren't really interested in speeding up all these proceedings. So I suspect that also in this case, the blame actually has to go also to the German authorities. But maybe, the other 3 participants in the discussion probably follow more closely how the proceedings actually work in choosing people and so on, and maybe can add to that.
Would you like to add something? Have you heard his statement? The rest, Yorgos?
Yes, I could say something. It's according to the islands, and the implementation of the EU-Turkey deal is based on a basic concept of discouraging migration. The basic legal barrier is called geographical restriction. So, according to the mantra of this authoritarian migration management, to move people from the hotspots, it creates a moral hazard, or it makes incentives for new migrants to come. And as you can imagine, in these circumstances of coronavirus reveals all the brutality of this supposedly administrative politics, and reveals its basic inhuman content. Actually, there is a basic demand to stop geographical restriction. It cannot be that at the islands are created such jungle camps like Moria and Vial, and these are not the spontaneous made camps. It's not like the ones in Calais. They are created by the authorities. It is crazy what is happening there, and it is also what fed this anti-migrant movement in the last months. So we speak of 4 years of failure of a deal which is not a deal, which is from the beginning just an outsourcing and of the responsibility. And now we can see that both the Greek government, but also European government, doesn't want to enter in a relocation scene in general. They don't want. It is, in my point, that urbanism became the mainstream. Nobody talks right now about such measures. But I think what we have to state clearly is no geographical restriction. It cannot be all the migration management happened in Moria and Vial.
So we can all agree that the European Union needs to act, and needs to act right now. The hotspots in the islands, they must close, they must shut down. Our refugees need to be safely relocated and should be provided immediately with asylum, with equal access to the health system and apartments and basic needs, basically. I would like to take a second so as to check for Carlos and Parvana if they can come back to us, because it seems that there is a bit of a delay. In the meantime, I'll just add that because many of you want to know what exactly is happening right now in the camp and are getting informed, in the event you can find Parvana's social accounts, Facebook, Twitter, as well as your page, so you can check more with her and the situation. Okay, we have you back in line. So, and for Carlos, there is another question, but we will need to check if he's gonna come back to us so as to ask him. In the meantime, would you like to address to each other a question? The rest that we have remained here. Andon, Parvana.
So something I've been wondering is now our campaign for, I mean, mostly focused on minors and evacuating minors from the situation and so on. Do you think that should we actually talk about also beyond just evacuating older people and more vulnerable people out of the islands to the Greek mainland, to bring those people out more than only just children? Would be one question. And the other question, maybe once again to Parvana, is how, like, from afar, beyond like raising the issues and amplifying your voices, do you have any other ideas of how concrete help could look like?
Parvana, could you hear Anton? Yes? Just remember to open your microphone. Okay.
So I think the first question was not from my side. I mean, you asked, you didn't. I mean, no, okay.
Basically, I asked all of you, so you as well.
So I think I cannot find a proper answer for the first question, but for the second one, sorry, can you please repeat the second question that was, I mean, especially for me.
Do you have any ideas what we specifically in Germany could do to support you more more concretely?
Yes. Okay. So firstly, as you know that refugees are breaking their silence. It means up to now they were silent against the situation. They were silent against anything that were happening to them. But these days, they some things are changing about the. I mean, in minds of refugees. They knew that the only one of the most important and impressive solutions is to raise their voices and to, for example, to tell their problems and to share their problems, like putting some videos in social media and like taking some video from their daily lives and daily difficulties, and they broke this I mean fear and scare that maybe it will affect their asylum apply, something that I was also afraid of. But this is a very it is the best chance because now the refugees are in the same way that, for example, most of the people that they are in solidarity with refugees are in the same way. For example, the refugees also want to be evacuated from the islands, and also the people also want the refugees to be transferred to a proper place. So in this situation, for example, in my perspective, is in this campus to first to widen necessities of refugees, and in another side, I mean, beside, they can also make more campaigns like putting more pressures to politicians. The same thing that's happening in Germany. We see that there are some impatience with doing these kind of campaigns and with involving the refugees in the campaigns. Like in most of the campaigns, like for example, we can call the "Leave No One Behind." They try to have the perspective of refugees and to ask them about their, for example, problems. And it was the impression of this campaign, because so the one of the solutions is to put more pressures to politicians. Mostly other countries are asking that why Germany. For example, when I was involved in the campaign of Leave No One Behind, in one of the videos they asked that why just Germany. It is just Germany because Germany decided, declared the solidarity with refugees, with having this kind of campaigns and to put pressures with and to be in the same. To, for example, change the minds of some parties of Germany. This is the thing that other countries can also do it. And yes, this is a summary, I think. I hope that I could give you a proper answer.
At this moment, there are two questions. One is general for all of you, and the other is directly for Carlos. So, would you like to tell us why so far the virus hasn't spread among refugees in the camps, although these terrible conditions? Is it because in reality the refugees themselves have taken upon them to maintain the health measures to their greatest of attempts? Just remember to switch on your microphone as well. We cannot hear you. Okay, try again once more, please. No, I just try to switch on your microphone. We can't hear you, Carlos. We can't hear you at all. So there is like on the screen underneath. It has to be. It has to be the white ones. And okay, you're on. No. Okay. So Carlos, is better like to yes, try to disconnect and connect again. Okay. All right. Okay. So, and the general question that will be for all of you to think about it. Actually, shouldn't the demand be freedom of movement for all, regardless age, regardless destination, etc.? That's the other question. So Carlos is back. Let's hear your voice now. No, we can't. Oh, I'm so sorry. We can't hear you at all. No. Just try to log out and log in one more time. Let's try to do that. Okay. Shall I repeat the question, or you got that?
Yeah.
I will just repeat it. Shouldn't the demand be freedom of movement for all, regardless age, destination, etc.? Parvana, would you like to tell us first your opinion?
Oh, yes. So freedom of movement is one of the most impressive steps that I have seen during the huge crisis. if we would have this kind of movements before, maybe we wouldn't be in the situation that we are. Because the refugee crisis didn't start in this year, it is for many years. But unfortunately, these kind of movements started in the and not. I mean, we didn't have them before. But of course, mostly the freedom of movement. Um, so I mean,
Sorry. Okay. Okay, Carlos, you're back.
yes.
I'm so sorry, Parvana, for interrupting you. We still cannot hear you, Carlos.
Oh yes, me too.
Let's continue with Parvana while Carlos is trying to come back to us. So please continue, Parvana. Parvana, can you
Yes,
hear us?
it's right. Something is wrong in my screen. I don't know.
So there must be a delay. We can hear you and see you properly.
Really? Okay, that's fine. So, mm,
Okay, so I will address the question again, the general one. So shouldn't the demand be freedom of movement for all, regardless age, destination, etc.? That was addressed to all of you. And then Carlos, in specific, he had, can you tell us why so far the virus hasn't spread among refugees in the camps, all of these terrible conditions? Is it because in reality, the refugees themselves have taken upon them to maintain the health measures to their greatest of attempts? So, Parvana, we can see you, we can hear you properly. All right, so maybe Yorgos, you can answer this question to us.
Well, freedom of movement is quite, it sounds quite utopic if you consider what's the politics and the world politics at this moment. That we have to think that it's one of the basic, of the very basic rights, and it's actually freedom of movement. What we, in a small scale, we as a Western are experiencing with these restrictions due to the coronavirus. The borders are obstacles against the global South and the people who are really suffering across and protects the wealth to the very centers of the global capitalism. But I want to say that freedom of movement is not coming alone. It's a part of the whole perspective, and it is always combined with the right to stay. So in this moment, if somebody says that freedom of movement would bring chaos, I'm saying that chaos or social dumping or social problems brings the illegalization of migration. More problems bring this inhuman condition in the borders of Europe, and more poison feeds into the societies and into the next generation than such universal demands, such basic and human rights and utopian but concrete directions for our action.
Thank you, Yorgos. Anton?
I can basically just, wholeheartedly agree with everything the two before me have said. And I also think there's one level where you have to think about ultimate political goals and so on. But freedom of movement at the moment in our current nation state, capitalist, and so on configuration is fairly utopian. And then you have to think about how to engage people and how to like nudge people forward along this way. And what we as Seebrücke, for example, in comparison to other movements, anti-racist movements in Germany have tried to do, is to have very moderate demands on the face. And to say, okay, at least everybody can agree on that, don't let people die. And then build up from there and try to build a big movement, starting from very general principles and then going out and engaging people also within our movements and discuss, oh, if you agree to that, wouldn't you actually have to agree to general freedom of movement as well? And so in this sense, yes, you're right. Obviously, the ultimate demand has to be people should be allowed to go wherever they want to, because it's completely arbitrary that we're restricted.
Parvana, would you like something to add? Carlos would like something to add, but we cannot hear you. However, I will try to answer because we received your text, and I will try to answer with your words written to the question that was originated to you. So the give me just a second for this. All right, so as Carlos answered, the outbreak in Rizona was registered coincidentally, meaning a pregnant woman giving labor in Athens, in a hospital in Athens, was tested positive. So in reality, we do not know what is happening currently in the camps. Perhaps there are other silent outbreaks ongoing, fortunately enough, still without causing major casualties. Refugees under these living and wash conditions cannot apply any proper hygienic measures, leaving them without any preventive control measure. That's what Carlos said to us. So, Parvana, would you like to conclude your answer because we interrupted you previously? And after this, I will thank you all.
All right. Yes, I just wanted to continue with, in fact, the freedom of movement was a general right between everybody. Before, like the refugee crisis starts, and it became more and more. For example, so for the first years of, for example, the wave of coming refugees in other countries, we didn't have something like. These kind of camps, and the camps weren't sorted, and there were no such strict rules against refugees, at least not to stay in the islands. And I think and I think it happened when, for example, the number of people became more and more, and it just started. I mean, by authorities, they made this kind of escalation for refugees. And when something, I mean, shapes from people, from legislators, so it can be, I mean, ignored again. Uh, and it just need to have some more, I mean, solidarity of politicians and the legislators with the refugees, and with the ones that they are agree with the idea of breaking these kind of rules, or at least breaking these rules against the most vulnerable people.
Thank you so much, Parvana, for your reply, for your answer.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So we would like to thank you all for this contribution and for this very interesting online discussion today. And we hope that we will keep it going. We will meet again. If nothing else needs to be added right now,